Hi, my name is Denee Thomas Mwendwa, and I am a professor at Howard University in the Department of Psychology. I am a trained clinical health psychologist who specializes in how stress impacts our mental and physical well-being. For this presentation, I want to talk about the importance of taking care of your mental health, because let's just face it, we don't always think about our mental health, especially when it's going well for us. So I want to make sure that we understand what stress is, how it impacts us, and ways in which we can cope with it so that um, when things don't go so well, you know what to do to prevent anything happening too seriously. Uh, College is incredibly stressful. And so developing coping strategies that help to prevent the negative effects of stress is going to be very important. So, what is mental health? And what do I mean by mental health? Mental health contains three important components: emotional, psychological, and social well being. Our mental health impacts the way in which we think about things, perceive events in our lives, and the way in which life happens, as well as our behavior. So, positive mental health allows us to realize our fullest potential, cope with the stressors that life will invariably bring, work productively in school as well as in work, and make meaningful contributions to our community. Why is mental health so important for you guys? Well, mental health is important for college students because it enhances your entire college experience. It's not just enough to go to college and exist in college. You want to thrive and be happy while you're there. It's 4 years of your life. So let's hope that you can enjoy it. The next reason why you want to make sure that your mental health is okay is that it reduces the likelihood that you engage in risky behavior. Now, I can remember in my college days, I did some, kind of wild and crazy things. However, some things are just too risky, like excessive drinking, use of drugs, engaging in poor eating habits, and disengaging from your family. So you want to make sure that your mental health stays on point so that you aren't engaging in those kinds of behaviors in order to help you cope. Mental health and well being is also associated with better academic performance. Now, I like to tell students all the time that learning should be for learning's sake and that you shouldn't always be so caught up in grades. But the reality is, grades do matter. GPA does matter. And taking care of your mental health will also help you with respect to achieving the best academic performance that you can. And lastly, the importance of mental health in school. Let's face it, you don't want to drop out. You get in. You took so much effort to get to college, you want to stay there. So it reduces the likelihood of your dropping out. So, what is stress? Um, I've been studying this a long time, and there really isn't one specific definition of stress, but we can generally agree on one kind of definition, which is it's physical and or emotional event that causes physical, emotional, and psychological changes in the mind and body. And this is in order for you to deal with whatever the perceived stressor is. It causes a physiological response that activates, and I'm sure you guys have heard this before, the sympathetic nervous system. That sympathetic nervous system, well, it's your friend. It helps you to deal and cope in the moment with the stress. However, when it becomes too taxing, that sympathetic nervous system doesn't shut off. So again, that's why we want to find ways in which to effectively cope. There are three types of stress that we as human beings encounter. The first is an acute stress. Acute stress can be both positive or negative. A positive acute stressor is important because, well, it helps us rise to the occasion. So, like, think about when you take a test and you need to study for that test, and you get into the classroom and you're taking that test. There is an activation of the sympathetic nervous system to get you on point so that you do the best that you could possibly do. In that case, you want that kind of stress response. However, when an acute stressor, like say for instance, we're stuck in traffic, somebody is taking too long in the shower in the dorm, and you're getting upset and annoyed, that's a negative stress response. Again, our bodies are built for that because at some point it goes back to normal in terms of the activation of that sympathetic nervous system. The next type of stressor is episodic acute stress. Now, this is a type of stress that seems to run what we call rampant throughout our lives. Um, it can kind of be like, well, let's just say it like this. It is the type of stress that you're most likely to deal with when you are in college. And it's that kind of on again, off again. Oh my God, I got to study for this test. Oh my God, I got to prepare for this presentation. Oh my God, oh my God. You know, it's just all of this constant need to, in essence, rise to the occasion. Now, this type of episodic acute stress, we're not as built for. And this is why, with this type of stress, it is incredibly important to, again, develop some coping strategies to help reduce the effects of the kind of, on again, off again stressors that we encounter. The last type of stress is chronic stress. Now, this is a type of stress that seems to not have any end in sight. It it's just enduring. And so this is one of those periods where you feel as though no matter what you do, the stress is inescapable. Um, this is the type of stress that our bodies really are not built for. And hopefully, uh, most of you won't have to endure this type of stress. Most of you watching this video presentation have experienced stress. So when can college become too stressful? According to the American Psychological Association, 74% of adults report experiencing some symptoms of stress. I don't have to tell you, college life can often be very stressful. You have to manage the demands of classes, and many of you have to balance your job, extracurricular activities, and your social life. So, here are some of the signs of stress that you may experience: headaches, heart palpitations, feeling anxious, problems with digestion, feeling sad, muscle tension, your heart racing, and oftentimes, because your body is working, you actually start feeling less energetic. So it's important to know the signs of stress so that we can do things to reduce those symptoms of stress. So, what are some of the common sources of stress for college students? The first one is indeed finances. It is expensive to go to college. Even some of our state colleges are high in terms of their tuition. So, the financial realities are indeed a reality. So, every year or so, The Ohio State University puts out a survey on in terms of the percentage of students who find that finances contribute to a high level of stress. And they found that 72% of students report that financial issues in terms of meeting tuition, buying the books, rank high in terms of common source of stress. The next type of stress is the academic demand. You have to, while you're in college, deal with the different tests that you got to take in your different courses, class assignments, managing your time, dealing with the administration office, dealing with financial aid office. All of those things can be stressful. Trust me, I know. And so, navigating and negotiating all the demands in terms of being able to engage in your academics is a huge source of stress. Then just because you're in college doesn't mean that other things go by the wayside. You have interpersonal relationships that you have to navigate and negotiate. You still have the demands of your family. I have a daughter that's in college. I always want her to come home. I want her to call all the time. So you have to deal with that stress. You have your friends. You got to navigate roommates. And, some of you have to navigate, the demands of being involved with somebody romantically. Those are all sources of stress. Many of you also have to worry about managing the demands of school as well as work. Because the financial piece is such a reality for many of you, you have to work outside of school. So that is also another source of stress. And then post graduation plans. You get into your fourth year of college and you have to decide, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I can vaguely remember that, trying to figure out what it is I want to do after college. That too is a source of stress for many of you. Now, when does stress become an issue? Like I said earlier in the presentation, stress is common. We're going to experience it, it's unavoidable. But there are times in which it may become an issue, and you need to look out for certain signs above and beyond the symptom of stress. And these include changes in your eating patterns. That means, are you eating too much, eating too little? Are you gaining weight? Are you losing weight? Are you having any disruption in your sleeping patterns? I know sleeping can be an issue for college students, but you have to try indeed to get sleep. And if you find it difficult to go to sleep or remain asleep, that also may be a sign that the stress is becoming an issue. Use of substances as a way to cope with your stress. Now, I'm not naive. I know indeed you're going to engage in some, let's say, alcohol use. And depending on where you are, maybe even some marijuana. But that can't be used as a way in which to cope with the stresses that are in your lives. So if you find that you are using these substances as a way to reduce your stress and otherwise you can't find other ways in which to do so, that is a problem. Social withdrawal. When you find that you are pulling away from your family and your friends, the things in which that typically make you happy, this is a sign that maybe the stress is becoming too much to handle. Your decline in academic performance. Oftentimes, if you ask me, dealing with students, that's the first sign. When you are performing in a way academically, and then you all of a sudden see a drop in the way in which you are, doing your assignments, taking your tests, being able to truly read your assignments, do your assignments. If you see a decline in that, that is also a sign. And then lastly, if you find that you're starting to develop, what I would call more serious mental health issues like depression and anxiety. So let's really talk about the numbers in terms of how stress impacts students when the stress becomes a little bit too unbearable. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, 40% of college students, as a consequence of dealing with stress, can gain weight and be considered overweight and obese. 60% of college students report having difficulty with their sleeping patterns. 54% of college students admit to consuming alcohol as a way in which to deal with their stress. And 44% admit to using marijuana in all its forms, smoking joints, blunts, bowls, bongs, dabs, pens, and edibles. 44% of you report that as a consequence of stress, you develop symptoms of depression and anxiety. And then 20% of college students report having thoughts of suicide. Okay, now I want to talk specifically about students of color. They are a unique population when it comes to thinking about stress in college. And before I kind of start talking about that, I want to talk specifically about the differences in students who go to HBCUs and then students who are of color and go to predominantly white institutions or PWIs. Now, racism and race-related stress uh, knows no boundaries in the sense that, people who go to historically Black colleges and universities are going to have to confront with the realities of race and racism just as much as students at predominantly white institutions. Because why? Racism exists from a systemic standpoint. HBCUs are unique in the sense that the environment in which students are operating, um, they have, I would say, greater representation. So oftentimes they're in environments where they see a lot of people who look a lot like them, whereas people of color in predominantly white institutions, they don't have that reality. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, make no mistake, students in both of those realities are going to be confronting issues of race and racism that need to be considered when you talk about the additional stresses that college brings with it once they enter school. So I'm going to provide some statistics about um, students of color. They don't really tease out, in essence, what that experience is like from from a historically Black college and university standpoint versus PWI. But I think it's just important to know that there are differences in terms of their stress levels based on race and racism. So, in general, students of color report higher rates of emotional distress. And this happens particularly in their first year because they're making that transition oftentimes from home into a space that is not familiar. And then again, on top of that, they're dealing also with the realities of race and racism. So research has demonstrated that the normal transition and the bumps and bruises that students encounter, when they go into their first year, it's kind of exacerbated for students of color. And a lot of that is attributed to the racism and the race realities that come with being of color. They also say that they experience more race-related stress and that this race-related stress places them at greater risk for mental health problems or distress, if you will. And again, even though the institutions vary in terms of the complexities of race and racism, that doesn't stop at 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 an institution's doorstep. So it's important to understand that students that are coming in of color are already tackling issues of race and racism that need to be thought about in terms of their mental health and wellness. 2% of students of color state that anxiety and depression are the reasons for their poor academic performance. 25% say they report suicidal thoughts. And then students of color are also less likely to seek mental health services as compared to their white counterparts. All the more reason that you, as a student of color, need to be aware of what's going on, feel comfortable with reaching out. But institutions also have to bear some responsibility of understanding the unique needs and unique sets of circumstances that you're coming to the table with. I also now want to talk about the mental health of our LGBTQAI population. This is a population like students of color who are coming in with unique sets of circumstances. This is a minoritized community that are already at risk for mental health issues. And these statistics, I want each one of you to pay particular attention to because they're absolutely alarming. 92% of LGBTQAI students report that their mental health has been negatively impacted by has negatively impacted their college experience. Excuse me. 66% report symptoms of anxiety. 53% report symptoms of depression. 52% report feeling socially isolated and alone, and 30% report experiencing thoughts of suicide. These statistics are alarming, and institutions have to be well aware of the unique experiences of our LGBT community. I am going to provide, obviously, coping strategies that I hope all students, but particularly students of color and LGBTQAI students, can take home to help mitigate some of the stress that they experience as a consequence of being in these communities. But I don't want it just to rest on individual responsibility. Institutions have to be well aware of the unique stressors that some students are coming to the table with. And they need to do more to reach out to communities that are at greater risk for mental health problems as a consequence of belonging to these communities. Now, this is not to stigmatize, this is just to be aware. Now, when the stress gets so much that you have to seek help, there are certain signs that you have to be aware of, that it gets to the point that you cannot engage in what I call activities of daily living. Then this is when you're going to have to reach out and seek help. According to a recent report, I think by US News and World Report, 23% of college students meet the diagnostic criteria for anxiety disorders. What do I mean by diagnostic criteria? We in the field of mental health, so mental health practitioners, have diagnostic criteria that we use in order to diagnose somebody with a mental health issue. If you have a certain number of some of these symptoms, we then diagnose you with a disorder. And I want to give you some of the signs of anxiety symptoms that we as clinicians look for to see whether or not you indeed meet criteria for a mental health disorder. Feeling nervous, uneasy, um, an inability to focus, concentrate, attend to things. Um, Another characteristic sign of anxiety is uncontrollable worry, feeling overwhelmed. Um, College brings about, you know, instances where you're going to feel overwhelmed. But when I'm talking overwhelmed, I'm really talking about from the standpoint that it's unbearable. It's to the point that you don't feel like you can do anything. Um, you often, when you're anxious, feel irritable. And sometimes, depending on the type of anxiety, you can feel isolated and alone. Um, and those are just some of the signs of anxiety. But there's a whole list that's being provided that you can also look at to determine whether or not you think your anxiety is a little bit more serious. Oh, before I forget, we really need to talk about the different types of anxiety. All anxiety is not the same. Um, so the three common types of anxiety that you see in college students: generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, which is very prevalent in college students, and obsessive compulsive disorder. 18% of college students also report that they meet the criteria for depression. Now, in my world of mental health, there are a lot of symptoms that overlap. So, for the purposes of this presentation, I'm just going to pull out some of the signs of depression that don't overlap with those that you will see in anxiety, and that includes a lack of general interest in pleasurable activities. So, if you find yourself, you know, withdrawing and being unable to do the things like hang out with your friends and you know talk to your family members and do the things that make you happy, that's a sign of depression. um, Changes in your sleeping patterns, particularly if you can go to sleep but then you wake up and you can't get back to sleep, that typically is a sign of depression. Feelings of hopelessness, emptiness, loneliness are signs that you may be experiencing a depressive disorder. Um, Changes in appetite, where you are gaining or losing weight in a relatively short period of time. And then, of course, frequent or recurrent thoughts of suicide or suicide attempts. Now, if you find as though you are thinking about suicide or having a plan to engage in a suicidal act, then there is a national suicide hotline available for you. And now it's three easy digits: 988. Please do not hesitate to reach out uh, to get the assistance that you need. There's someone there 24 hours a day. More resources will be provided in terms of mental health at the end of the presentation. Okay, there are other common mental health issues that we see in college students: eating disorders, substance use disorders, attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, and bipolar disorder. Know the signs, recognize the signs, because if you are indeed in distress, please reach out. Reach out to your family, your friends, your mental health counselors that are available on campus, in the community. Here are some resources that you can turn to that hopefully can provide you with services in your town: the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the Steve Fund, and the Black Mental Health. Please don't hesitate to reach out for assistance. Someone is always there to help you. Okay, it's not enough to now tell you that stress is, problematic. I want you to be able to leave here with some understanding that there are ways in which you can effectively cope with stress. You can't avoid it, so let's find ways to be proactive and cope with it. One of the ways in which you can do this is get enough sleep. On average, college students get roughly 6 hours of sleep. However, 8 hours is recommended. I know it's not always easy to sleep while in college, but sleep is important, not only biologically, but psychologically. So, what should you do? Try to maintain a regular sleep wake cycle. Again, I'm not naive. I know this is difficult, but if you try to find a time to go to bed every night at the same time and try to wake up in and around the same time, that helps you to develop a good sleep routine. Find ways in which to unwind, relax before you go to sleep. That means shutting down your mind, cutting off that computer, limiting your social media. So that may be, taking a shower, listening to soothing music, meditation, deep breathing. Create an environment that promotes sleep. The next thing you can do to help mitigate your stress is eat well-balanced meals. Now, college campuses can be a little bit challenging in terms of eating healthy, but finding ways to eat balanced meals throughout the day can reduce your risk for developing depression and anxiety. And it will also improve your ability to think and concentrate and do the things that you need to do to be successful in college. So, what do I mean by eat balanced meals? Make sure that at mealtime you have a protein, a complex carbohydrate, and some healthy fats. A complex carbohydrate like brown rice, healthy fats like avocado. Eat at regular intervals. So, again, eat at breakfast. Try to have a midday snack. Then eat lunch, and then a late afternoon snack, and then dinner. And then try not to snack too much throughout the day. And if you choose to snack, choose healthy snacks like almonds, um, dried fruits, etc. And then remember to stay hydrated. It is important that you drink as much water as you possibly can throughout the day. Next, engage in regular exercise. Research has demonstrated that college students who engage in regular exercise are likely to have better mental health and overall enjoy college. It is recommended that you guys engage in a minimum of 2.5 hours of moderately intense physical activity per week. So go out for a brisk walk. If you like to run, I'm not one of those people, but if you like to run, jog, aerobics, um, dance class, playing basketball. Find time to work out and make it a priority. Incorporate both cardiovascular exercise as well as strength training. The next thing I want you to think about when in terms of reducing your stress and coping with your stress is setting realistic goals. We all have things that we want to achieve while we're in college, but you have to establish short and long-term goals that are realistic. So when thinking about setting goals, think about this acronym. Think SMART. Your goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant to what it is that you're trying to do, and time bound. There's so many YouTube videos out there and programs that talk specifically about developing SMART goals. So I encourage you to put in your search engine SMART goals, and you can find resources to help you do so. Next, make time to relax. What do I mean by that? Engage in activities that truly reduce your mental stress and energy. Engage in activities that calm you, that deactivate your sympathetic nervous system. And these are activities like listening to music, walking around with your friends, again, yoga and meditation. Can you tell I'm a big fan of yoga and meditation? And engaging in some aromatherapy. If you have the opportunity, get a massage. For some people who like to do so, go get a manicure. I'm not one of those people, but whatever it is that makes you feel good mentally and relaxes you, I encourage you to do it. Lastly, find your tribe. Find your social support system. Everybody needs it. Everybody needs a social network. We are social beings. Students who report having a strong social support network say they overall have a better experience in college. And your network can consist of family, friends, teachers, professors, administrators. You don't have to limit it. Anyone who can help you through the college experience, utilize them. I had a multitude of mentors when I was in college, and they served all sorts of roles for myself. I had a host of friends and family. Find somebody to connect with. Social engagement is important. Stepping outside your comfort zone and finding those things that, are not necessarily traditionally within your college or your school or your major, and branching out and investigating outside of that. Um, when I was in school, I was a political science major, believe it or not, before I entered into psychology. I was in a singing group. So that's a way in which I broadened my horizons, and I had my tribe. It was an a cappella group, yeah, try to do some things like that and branch out, because trust me when I say it helps with your stress level. And it ultimately, to me, helps you not take yourself and college life so seriously. It's a way to have fun. Now, I wish someone, when I was coming through, did this for me, and I hope it's helpful for you. I say this to my kids to this day. Find an affirmation or two or three that you can say to yourself every day. I have a whole host of them that I say to myself, and I'm sharing one with you right now. This helps me remember that I am indeed powerful, that the only thing that limits me is me and my fear if I allow it. Find something that resonates with you and say it. It really does help when you say it. Words are powerful and they're meaningful, and you owe it to yourself to say something that's going to motivate you to be the best you can possibly be. This has been a joy. I am so glad for this opportunity, and I wish you all the best that life has to offer you. See you soon.